Spider-Man is gonna have his hands full when Spider-Man No Way Home hits theaters, with a slew of old villains making their way into the MCU, looking to beat the snot out of this universe's webhead. One major one that a lot of the marketing has been focusing on has been Doctor Otto Octavius, aka Doc Ock, which is specifically the version from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy. And man, what a version to bring back to the big screen. He is definitely iconic. However, he is only one of a ton of different versions of the character that have appeared throughout the years. So knowing that there are a ton of them out there, why not rank them? And that is exactly what I'm going to do in this video. I'll take a look at a small handful that I think are the most noteworthy, and break down which one of them might just be the most powerful of them all. With that being said, let's go ahead and dive right into it. Let's start this list off with a version of Doc Ock that even the comic writers seem to want us to forget about, as even though she is still technically active within the main 616 continuity, she almost never seems to pop up, though lately she has been hanging around just a little bit. During the Clone Saga event, Doctor Otto Octavius was taken out by Kane. After his passing, a former student of his, Carlyle Trainer, stepped up. Utilizing a set of robotic arms just like her former mentor, she took on the name Dr. Octopus in his honor, hoping to continue his work. Throughout the mid-90s, she regularly came up against the Ben Reilly version of Spider-Man, though, like her predecessor, she never could seem to get the upper hand over the webhead. Eventually, Trainer was involved in attempts to bring Octavius back to life, which ultimately proved to be quite successful. Once he was back, she passed along the metal arms and mantle of Doc Ock, instead becoming Lady Octopus. From then on, she pretty much just started to blend into the background, kinda just playing second fiddle to other characters, working alongside villains such as Beetle, Vulture, Kindred, and of course, Doc Ock himself. However, she did seemingly inspire another better version of Dr. Octopus that we are going to be talking about a little later. So if for no other reason than that, she gets a spot on this list. Plus, I mean, look at her. Her design is just so 90s, it's fantastic. Yet another entry that proves that cheap imitations are not nearly as good as the real thing. Luke Carlyle was a talented thief and con man who somehow managed to trick his way up the ladder at Nexus Industries over a fairly short period of time. Eventually, he reached out to Octavius and convinced him to come work for them, stating that he could help him become a full-on legit researcher once again. However, what actually happened was Carlyle had his underlings study and steal Octavius's tech, which he took and upgraded using modern technology and 2 additional robotic arms, becoming the 3rd Dr. Octopus. Octavius, understandably, did not take too kindly to this. So instead of just taking it lying down like some people might, he instead teamed up with his arch nemesis, Spider-Man, and went after Carlyle. And they absolutely demolished the guy, with Ock splitting his fancy new suit open, allowing Spider-Man to fill it with all kinds of gross webbing, effectively shutting it down. Honestly, this guy and the last entry probably could be swapped, simply due to the fact that Lady Octopus lasted significantly longer. However, despite this, Carlyle's suit is technically more impressive, and since this is supposed to be a ranking of how powerful they are, I guess he gets to go here. Know this, even though I am the one making this video, and could very easily just bend the rules to put him lower, I'm gonna be putting him here. I'm not happy about it though. Okay, so this one isn't exactly the most serious entry on this list, but there's no way I wasn't going to include the animal version of Doc Ock on this list. And no, I don't mean the octopus that was irradiated to the point of gaining genius-level intellect. And yes, that was a thing that happened in the comics. I've said this once, I'll say it a million more times. Comics are weird, guys. I actually mean Dr. Octopussycat from Earth 8311, one of the enemies belonging to Spider-Ham. Admittedly, not a lot is known about this frisky feline, as he hasn't really gotten a ton of coverage in the comics. What we do know is that he is a member of the Swinister Six, alongside Mysterio, Buzzard, Electro, Sand Manatee, and Green Gobbler, which is just about the most fantastic group of villain names that I have ever heard. Power level wise, he seems to be about on par with your bog standard Doc Ock. He's a genius who has a set of robotic tentacles that he uses for nefarious means. What more do you need? On top of that, he's an absolutely adorable kitty cat, and who doesn't love a cute kitten? Is that a good reason to put him here on the list? No, but I'm gonna do it anyways, because I think that when the claws come out, he could probably beat the previous entries, no problem. Giving them some of that old-fashioned cat scratch fever, as it were. And yes, I understand that that's a metaphor for something else entirely, but we're moving on. What would happen if the events of the Marvel Universe happened as you would expect, except they occurred hundreds of years before? Well, that is a question that was answered in the short Marvel 1602 comic arc. This arc showed us a version of things where some of our favorite heroes and villains were changed to fit the pre-industrialized world. Included among them was the Italian Baron Victor Octavius, a man who suffered from the bubonic plague. In an attempt to find a cure, he began injecting himself with the blood of octopi. This worked, but it also transformed him into a twisted human-octopus hybrid, which is totally not how that would actually work, but okay, just roll with it. As he became more and more mutated, his mind started to break. So much so that when he reached his final form, he started to believe that this was the superior form of life, and wound up attacking several people, before an old-timey Hank Pym stepped on him, ending his life. Basically, this version of Doc Ock is pretty similar to regular Ock, except instead of having mechanical tentacles, they were organic, which come with their own pros and cons. Regardless of this version's power level though, he easily wins out as probably the most disturbing version of Octopus on this list. Hands down. Just look at him. Ugh. I absolutely love the Spider-Man game on PlayStation 4. It is honestly the entire reason why I bought one in the first place. I'm usually much more of a PC gamer myself, though I'm not opposed to consoles by any means. In addition to having some of the best gameplay in any superhero game ever, this game also gave us a fantastic version of Doctor Otto Octavius. At the beginning of the story, we get to see Otto as he was before going mad, as an idealistic scientist who wanted to change the world for the better. However, after having his life's work stripped away from him, he turned to a life of crime, becoming the Dr. Octopus that we all know and love. He is pretty much exactly like your baseline Ock, same abilities and everything. Most of the changes between him and normal comic Octopus come down to some more practical upgrades to his suit, such as his robotic arms, which seem to share some design cues with the Sam Raimi version of Ock. Though they are similar, I think these arms might just be more menacing. They're just so dang pointy. However, he gains this spot on the list purely due to the emotional weight that he brings to the story. Seriously, even as he's rampaging around, infecting the entire city with a deadly virus, or helping to release all of the villains you spent the entire game trying to get locked away in the raft, you still kind of feel for the guy. Also, he is responsible for the formation of this universe's Sinister Six, which is no joke, so he gets some serious props for that as well. No matter how much people sometimes badmouth it, the Ultimate Universe has proven to be responsible for a lot of the more modern interpretations of Marvel characters, be them on the page, in games or movies or television. A lot of them draw direct inspiration from the Ultimate versions of the respective characters, such as Ultimate Doc Ock, who seem to have some pretty heavy influence on at least the look of Sam Raimi's version of Octopus, if not the whole vibe of the character. This version of Ock was a researcher who was injured in the same lab accident that transformed Norman Osborn into the Green Goblin. Becoming fused with a set of mechanical arms, he quickly set out to take revenge on those responsible for the accident, giving us this universe's Dr. Octopus in earnest. This Ock is fairly similar to regular Octopus, except that he has the ability to mentally communicate with the arms, even when they're not attached to him and a ways away. He can also manipulate metal to a certain degree, similar to something you'd expect from someone like Magneto. He even once used this power to craft himself some new arms on the fly using scrap metal, allowing himself to stay in the fight just a little bit longer. It is definitely a cool version of the character, and one where you can clearly see the influence it had on later versions of Doc Ock. Kind of a bummer then that he got taken out in the way that he did. Goblin is certainly a powerful villain in his own right, no doubt, but personally, I think that Doc Ock could take him 9 times out of 10. Seems though that in this case, it turned out to be that one time. Life was pretty good for Peter Parker, and you know when things start to go well for the guy, that usually means that something is about to go horribly wrong. It's kind of his whole shtick. While visiting a dying Octavius, Otto enacted a dastardly scheme, where he swapped minds with Parker, allowing him to continue living on in Peter's body, while Parker wasted away in the fragile frame of a dying man. However, Octavius was quickly influenced by the memories of Parker, which caused him to decide to try to continue Peter's heroic work as the Webhead, becoming the superior Spider-Man. And for a time, he was indeed Spider-Man, though he dealt with crime in a far more violent and brutal fashion than Parker ever did, which didn't exactly make him a ton of friends. Instead, it led to an angry mob which sought to end him. However, Octavius had learned around that time that Parker's mind was actually still in his head, buried deep in his subconscious. So in one last act of heroism, he sacrificed himself, allowing Parker to take over to once again become the true Spider-Man. Now, how could I not include the superior Spider-Man as one of the most powerful versions of Octavius? He's basically Spider-Man, the guy who keeps time and time again beating the crap out of Ock, only this time without the morals and ethics getting in his way. Plus, Octavius went ahead and added robotic arms to the standard Spider-Man suit, because of course he did. So major bonus points for coolness on that one. You had to have known that the classic comic book version of Octavius was going to be making an appearance somewhere on this list eventually. Come on, the dude's just iconic. How could he not be on here? As the very foundation of all those that followed him, this Ock is as bog standard as it gets. Even his original motivations for turning to a life of crime are about as cookie cutter as they come, with him really just wanting to rob banks and commit other crimes in order to try to increase his own personal wealth. However, despite this, he managed to become a major antagonist for the Wall Crawler. This Octavius also gets some serious points for being the one who initially founded the Sinister Six, and has been behind virtually every incarnation of it within the main comics continuity. This might be the reason why so many people are thinking that Spider-Man No Way Home is going to give us the cinematic version of that team, since Ock is pretty front and center in all of the marketing materials for the movie. Well, okay, that and people can count how many baddies there are, which is getting dangerously close to 6. Like, they just need to reveal one more villain and we're there. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was absolutely amazing. I don't think many people would argue with me on that front. One thing that this film did incredibly well was giving us versions of characters that we know and love, but presented in interesting or unexpected ways. One of the most unexpected was easily the introduction of Dr. Olivia Octavius. This Octavius was the head scientist at Alchemax and was working with Wilson Fisk on dimension traversal and manipulation technology, hoping to make history. However, her plans were ultimately thwarted by a band of spider people. Her robotic arms are fairly unique amongst all of the Doc Ocks, as instead of being huge metallic tentacles, she instead has a set made out of some sort of inflatable technology, which allows her to keep her arms on her at all times, wearing them underneath regular clothing, which I have to imagine comes in pretty handy. Beyond all that, we don't really know too much about this version of Octavius. Presumably, she faced off against this universe's version of Parker on at least a few occasions. And there seems to be some kind of implied relationship between Aunt May and Octavius, as Aunt May refers to her as Liv, which is apparently the name that her friends call her. And here's to hoping that we get to find out a little bit more about this version of the character when we get Spider-Verse 2 at some point in the not too distant future. Finally, we have what might very well be the gold standard for Dr. Octopus in pretty much any form. That being, of course, the version from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. Appearing in Spider-Man 2, a movie which is arguably one of the best superhero films ever made, this Doc Ock was portrayed by Alfred Molina, whose nuanced portrayal of the man managed to not just pull on your heartstrings, as you watch this once kind and caring scientist descend into madness after being physically and emotionally deformed by the failure of his greatest experiment and death of his beloved wife, but also became a villain that you wish to see the hero take down more than anything. He is such an iconic version of the character that when it came time for Ock to appear in the MCU, naturally, the people at Disney devised a plan to bring Molina back, giving us a version of the character who was apparently plucked from his timeline moments before the end of his character that we saw in the original movie. Also, that we can get more of this perfect version. Whether or not he manages to stick around after the end of that movie, or what role he will have to play overall, is still uncertain at this point. So we'll just have to wait and see what No Way Home has in store for him. Either way, I for one am very excited to see him once again. Hey there everybody, I'm John Aldetz. I made this video, and I want to know what you think. How would you rank the different versions of Doc Ock? Is there one that you would include that I didn't mention? Let me know in the comments down below, or go ahead and shoot me a response over on Twitter. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to CBR for more great videos in the future.